Welcome to Successful Leadership in Times of Crisis, supporting remote teams. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Yusra Benjeloun, Administrative Coordinator and Project Manager with the Work Wellness Institute, and I'll be moderating the webinar today. Let's welcome Dr. Laura Hambley and April Dyrda to this timely webinar.
So, like I said, when we use the term distributed work, what we mean is when you're apart from your colleagues and apart from your supervisor, at least some of the time. And this topic has been going on in a lot of ways. There's dispersed teams that are working out of different office buildings globally, for example. There's been teleworker programs here and there. There's been organizations who are doing activity-based work and creating flexible or agile workplaces where people can work where and when they're most effective and move between different settings, including home. But what COVID and this horrible crisis we're all going through has led to much more of a discussion on is these three areas. There's a lot of people working from home right now, which we call telework or telecommuting. And there's a lot of dispersed or virtual teams because of that. And a lot of people are working remotely or in a mobile way, mostly from home. And telework is something that works well when you can have preparation. You have a distraction-free home environment. You don't have your kids at home that you're trying to school at the same time. So we need to be really careful with the fact that this situation we're in now is far from ideal. And it's not a true test of telework effectiveness. But we're all in it together, and we need to do our very best to be productive and, most importantly, healthy mentally and physically through this disastrous period. And that's why we really focus on wellness and balance. I mean, I don't love the term balance as a mother of 3 kids myself and an entrepreneur, and nothing's ever perfectly in balance, to be honest with you. However, it's important that I feel well about my work, that I feel focused and productive, that I'm performing, and that I am managing my work and my life, and that I stay healthy during this pandemic, and I do my part in not spreading the virus. So really, balance is important in wellness, and really managing my distractions and working productively when I am working from home, and providing strong remote leadership to my own team and helping other teams develop remote leadership, which we know there's a lot of behaviors and practices that work, and we know what doesn't work. So the good news is, when we look at the opportunities in all of this difficult time, the research over many years has shown us that productivity increases 10 to 30% for those working away from the traditional office. But this image on this slide is misleading, because working away from the office remotely does not mean that you're doing childcare and homeschooling at the same time. I mean, that's not going to increase our productivity at all. It's not an ideal balance. In general, those of us that can focus and that have the right setup and the right balance of time between an office and time at home are 10 to 30% more effective. So leading in a mobile world, basically to sum it up, compared to leading face-to-face, when I have the luxury of walking down the hall and seeing my colleagues, you need all the skills that you need to lead face-to-face, but you need additional skills when you're leading remotely. That's what this slide is all about. You need a combination from all of our research of skills and attributes. Skills are the things that you are good at and you learn. Attributes are certain personality traits that do lead to behaviors, and it's the behaviors that you demonstrate as well as your skills that produce capabilities to manage remotely. And our capabilities model here has been honed over the years, and it is a great way of capturing all the different categories of capability that a leader needs remotely. So being accessible and supportive, building trusting relationships, creating a team of team unity, fostering collaboration from a distance. I mean, those are examples. And when you look at all of these 13 elements, and I ask you how many of these apply to a face-to-face environment, I know what your answer would be. It would be all of them apply, Laura, and you're absolutely right. All of these apply because you first and foremost need to be a good leader. And secondly, you need to add a lot more planfulness, intentionality, use of technology, and the nuances involved in communicating and leading from a distance to all of these different elements. And that's what we've dedicated our work evolution to.
So first of all, good boundary control looks like communicating your working hours. So some of you are saying you're working long hours, maybe into the evenings and on the weekends, which isn't necessarily a bad thing when we are, like Laura mentioned, maybe schooling our kids from home at this point, and it might not be ideal for us to be working during work hours. So if your hours are irregular, the people you're working with need to be aware of this so they know when they can expect to hear from you. And to take this a step further, it can actually be really useful to ensure that the people you're working with actually know how to contact you, especially in cases of urgency. So, making it clear whether or not you're all right being contacted by text message for an urgent question, or if your preference would be email or phone. Defining your own preferences regarding work hours and response times will naturally work to give others permission to do the same and can really streamline communication. Another piece here around boundary control is that part of good work discipline is knowing when not to work, as much as knowing when to work. For those of you who are forgetting to take breaks and not taking time in your day to get up and get some fresh air and move around, being able to take breaks and communicating with people when you're unavailable will not only actually enhance your productivity, but will increase the efficiency of workflow and set a standard for your staff. So being able to have good boundaries and secondly, communicate those boundaries are really, really key for productivity and efficiency. When we work remotely, we and our employees can feel pressure to work continuously. Part of the reason why many of you probably aren't taking breaks in your day. So being in uncertain times naturally contributes to a loss of structure in our lives, and helping to maintain some of that structure in our work will help to maintain wellness. So really simple tips to do this includes not scheduling meetings over lunch hours or at the ends of the day when they could go beyond work. Limiting your own email responding, we recommend 2 sessions per day, and making use of a delay send feature when you're emailing outside of work hours. All of these sorts of habits make it so people don't feel they need to constantly be on when they're working remotely. And this last one in particular can be tricky because, as I mentioned, it's often in the evenings when we have a moment away from kids or family that we can really get the mental and literal space that we need to catch up on work. But I encourage you all, if you're sending emails on a Saturday morning or a Sunday night, to use that delay send feature. It's naturally going to increase the stress of your staff before the work week has even begun if they're seeing emails starting to come through. So try using that feature and setting that boundary. Building trust when working apart is putting people first. This is probably the most important element of this factor. The first thing to consider, especially when you're working remotely, is to try to minimize distractions. It can be really easy when there's a screen between you and the person you're chatting with to check your emails, to multitask, to get sidetracked. I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of you have had a notification pop up on your screen since this started and been tempted to check in on that. So the reason this can be problematic is that it doesn't only cause us to lose focus, but it can also send the message that other people don't deserve our attention. And that in itself can naturally work to erode trust. The next point here when we're talking about putting people first is to take time to ask about someone's day and be willing to share your own personal experiences and challenges. So being sensitive and personally vulnerable about the impacts of work, uncertainties about COVID, personal lives, those sorts of things can really create space for what I like to call human connection. And you're not expected to know all the answers by any means, but you can still be a source of support. And what happens is when we create this space for connection with people, we're able to experience empathy. And with empathy, we can build relationships. At the end of the day, a strong personal connection is the quickest and most simple way to establish trust with someone. And we naturally do this more often in person, informally, during our conversations. So, we might stop by someone's office, we might go grab a coffee with them. There's always opportunities face-to-face for these personal connections. But when we are working remotely, it does need to be intentional in our virtual communications. So our office, our own meetings, we have a 5-minute personal moment at the beginning of most meetings where we can talk about something in our life that's not work related. I'd encourage you all to actually introduce this into your emails as well. We have a habit of jumping right into work when we send an email, getting right to the point. But try to introduce something to that dialogue that isn't work related, and just see how valuable that can be to building that trust. All right, and then the third and final section here is improving communication. And this is often the most commonly cited struggle from people when we work with remote teams. So there's a couple of practices I'm going to share with you today. The first being to use regular check-ins. Now, checking in with your team will provide you with added structure, clarity, and guidance when you're working remotely, especially as we all adjust to these new work arrangements and we no longer have those informal water cooler conversations or the ability to step out of the office for a coffee. It's important to find other ways to connect to replace that FaceTime. So the virtual coffee is the first one we recommend. This is really, really great for relationship building. And it means taking 20 minutes of your time to get on Zoom, GoToMeeting, or another video conferencing platform and just chat with a team member for 20 minutes. It's a great tool to facilitate better awareness and create opportunities for support and guidance, as your team might be unaware that they're struggling with an issue until they've vocalized it with you. In thinking about communicating when we're working apart from your team, being versatile and really becoming aware of the fact that in the most basic sense, not over-relying on any one communication method to engage with others is so important. The reality is that different types of communication mediums actually work better for certain types of people and for certain types of situations. And so it's important to make sure that you clarify and tailor the amount and type of communication to individual needs for those you're working with, just to know that one size does not fit all when it comes to communication preferences. So for example, me personally, I know that if something's project related, I really like to have an email chain about that. So there's a thread of that communication. But my team knows I'm not one to pick up the phone. So if they need to get a hold of me immediately or they have a question that needs answering, I've let my people know that I'm okay being contacted by text message. That's fine. That's a good way to get a hold of me. So making these clear with each other can really maximize the efficiency of your communication.